Good morning. Today is Wednesday, July 22nd. Let's start here. This is a verse that I've been using a lot lately, but for good reason. I think that the times that we live in are especially applicable for us to look at this particular verse. It was Paul writing to the young preacher Timothy in the second letter to Timothy, and he said this: For God has not given us a spirit of timidity, but of power and love and discipline. As Christians, we are not to live in timidity. We're not to be afraid of the world. We're not to be afraid to speak truth. And we are not to be bullied by the forces of evil. But there seems to be surrounding us right now an organized effort to intimidate, that is, to plant timidity in us. There are political forces that are screaming their opinions at us, and honestly, we're not sure how to respond. There are leaders of social movements that are so convinced that theirs is the way of truth that they confront and threaten and sometimes actually even do harm to anyone who states a different idea. There are, in fact, criminal elements that are destroying property and are allowed to get away with it because no one wants to inflame the situation. And then there are those with a different moral standard that they are promoting. And they're winning so much approval from so many others that to speak against that new moral standard, one that is certainly not biblical, is to risk your own property and your own position and your own reputation. There is so much going on right now that I think it's fair for us to simply call it insanity. And there's so much of this insanity that is going on right now. Personally, I just want to scream, where are the adults in the room? Much of this chaos could have been avoided if wiser, stronger men and women would have stood up to all this to begin with. Now, let me also say this, that there are some who are protesting, some who are promoting causes that are blaring in the headlines right now, and those protests should take place. And those causes should be in the headlines because there are things that need to be fixed in our society. But attacking a policeman or degrading someone because they show political support for someone you don't agree with, that's simply childish. It's selfish and it's childish. Edmund Burke was a British statesman who said a lot of amazing things, as a matter of fact, but the thing he's probably most noted for saying is this: the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. It was also Edmund Burke who said, no power so effectively robs the mind of all of its powers of acting and reasoning as fear. And then how about this one? Again, an Edmund Burke quote: nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. Indeed, wise words, spoken a long time ago, but applicable to us perhaps in a whole new way. Indeed, the world wants us to be timid, but that is not God's plan. But it's also fair to point out here that it's not fair for me to say that something needs to be done without saying something that we might do. I'd like to suggest 4 weapons we need to equip us to face the world today, face these challenges that are before us. Let me also say this. I'm going to expand upon this coming Sunday in the sermon that I'm going to preach during our worship time. I hope that you are able to either be here or to watch that in our live streaming. But I think there are some things that we as Christians finally need to realize in a whole new way. So let me put forth 4 suggestions. Number 1, Nothing makes a greater statement about who we are or what we want to become than knowledge. Real knowledge of the truth. We need to equip ourselves with the knowledge of God's Word and with the knowledge of the situations that we face. We not only need to be equipping ourselves with this knowledge, but we need to be equipping our children and our grandchildren, teaching them how to give an answer to the world for the hope that is in them, helping them to be reasonable and strong adults when they get to that point that are able to handle the truth in a way that is kind and yet persuasive and forceful. I know many of us have decided to kind of simply ignore the news of the day. And we've chosen in that path to live in the peace that comes from simply ignoring what's going on. But by ignoring what's happening, we allow it to all continue to happen. A few weeks ago, I was truly of the mind myself as to simply ignore the things that are going on. But I believe we cannot do that anymore. I think we cannot continue to be so isolated in our thinking. Too much harm is being done. Too many things are happening that God Himself would oppose, and that as people of God, we cannot ignore. So, first of all, we equip ourselves with knowledge. Secondly, our faith needs to grow to meet the challenge. Are we afraid of what might happen? Are we fearful of what this means to our children? Faith must answer. Trust in God. Trust in the Word that He gave us. Be people of God and people of that Word, and let us demonstrate faith. Faith is meant to be a very active verb. It's not to be something that is simply stored on a shelf or used occasionally. It is to be the identifier of who we are. When we look at Hebrews 11, we see that list of heroes because of what they did, because of their faith. It is a time for us to do things because of our faith. So equipped with knowledge, we demonstrate our faith. Third, our conviction must be at least on the same level as the conviction of the world. The world right now is showing a great determination to promote their cause or their causes. They're willing to get out and to be counted for what they believe. So must we. And finally, remembering the heroes of the faith that have gone before us, we think about Abraham and Moses and Joshua and David and the prophets and the apostles and the early Christians. We must display courage. Courage. Standing up in spite of what's going on all around us. Equipped with knowledge and faith and conviction, we then display courage. If this sounds like a call to arms, let me tell you, I hope that indeed it is. The church cannot remain timid. We have this time. We have these circumstances to deal with right now. And like Esther in the Old Testament, who knows but that we have attained our position for such a time as this? Today is the day for each of us to decide where we stand and what our life truly is all about. We have a call to do what God needs us to do in this critical time. Christians, let's stand up together.